Can you believe that? That's right. This is a paranormal, cool, crazy, weird channel brought to you by myself, Tommy Durant, a paranormal consultant, and this lovely gentleman next to me, who is the Car Wizard. He's a YouTuber, and not just any YouTuber, he's a really great YouTuber who does a lot of awesome automotive content. He's appeared on Hoovie's Garage as well as his own channel, and also has come and helped us out on Car Trek and Car Issues as our main, hey, mechanical guru, right?
That's right. I have all kinds of great stories I can tell you about cars all day long. But I think today I want to play a game with you, Tommy. I'm going to give you three different accounts of things that scared the you know what out of me, experiences that I've had, and see in your, obviously you've been in this field for a long time. Can you top it or can you beat it?
Oh man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to top your stories, but you know what? We're going to try right here, right now, our scary stories.
Yes. Maybe you guys have some stories you can let us know in the comments below, things that have scared the devil out of you, and let us know what you think about the stories we have. So, without further ado, I'll start with my first one.
All right, let's have it, Wizard.
A couple of these I've told in the past and previous episodes. If you haven't watched them, you should go back and watch all of them. They're all really good. The first one was actually when I first saw, and actually the only time I saw a UFO.
I remember this.
In the story, like I've mentioned before, I go to the restroom, I look out the back window, and quite a distance away is there's a pale UFO, some sort of a like a top hat shaped object, kind of floating there, slowly moving this way and then that way. Then it goes down a little bit. It was there for about an hour, and I stayed up for most of the hour watching it. And even today, my wife tells me, she says, "Why didn't you wake me up so I can see it?" And now I look back at it, just didn't like in the video before you talked about, Tommy, is when people see something so strange or so fearful, they're almost like their brain just wants to normalize it and pretend like nothing ever happened.
Yep.
And so I'm sitting here watching this thing, and then it hits me. What if a few of whatever's inside of that thing is walking around in my yard right now? What do I do when I start hearing the door locks or things start rattling? Something's trying to get in. I honestly sat and had to, this isn't a joke. I really had to come up with a scenario. Do I go get my gun now?
Yeah.
Will it even be effective? Will they just somehow, what is that, Tommy? Whenever people have been abducted, they feel that they can't move. They can't, like they've been disabled as
Yeah,
far
there's
as
like a paralysis that happens.
paralysis. That's
Yeah.
it. Or they just put paralysis on me and I won't be able to do anything. Why are they here? Are they violent? Are they going to hurt me? Are they going to hurt my wife? I was actually very scared. You know, some people look at it, see a UFO, oh, that's so cool. Where did they come from or something? In my mind, a lot of fear started coming into my mind. What am I up against? What if this thing moves over the top of my house? Am I about to be abducted? Is my wife going to be abducted? Will I ever see her again? I was literally scared, shaking in my boots.
Yeah.
But like I talked about when Tommy mentioned before, I don't know what the phenomenon is called, but I just went back to bed like it never happened. What is that called, Tommy?
Well, a lot of people just call it paranormal apathy. It's like a weird sort of washover of like, well, nothing we can do here, nothing to see here, going back to bed, and people just will go right back to sleep. And it can happen from anything paranormal at all, like ghosts or demons, happens. UFOs, it happens. Even sometimes people seeing cryptids, they just have that apathy afterwards, and that's all it is. It's this weird washover of like, eh, and business as usual because nothing to see here.
It was really weird how I could just go to bed and just shut all that out. But I really, really was afraid for my life because I was picturing what could be inside of that craft. Is it a being that looks kind of like me? Is it a xenomorph?
Hope it's not a xenomorph. I saw Romulus. I don't want any of that.
Yeah, I didn't want any of that. So that's my first one. I want to know, Tommy, in your field, have you experienced anything UFO related that scared the hell out of you?
I will tell you one story that I don't share very often. And it's because, like, people think that if you have all these different paranormal experiences, then you're obviously a quack or a fraud. I do think some people are maybe magnets for this kind of stuff. So when I was about 13 years old, a friend of mine, Sean, who used to live, as close as down the street, we lived in the middle of the woods in New Hampshire. So picture a
Yeah.
dark night, and we used to live in this 25 acres of land with hardly any houses around us, and that was our property. Across from us was this large swampland that was watershed land that was owned by the city, or this, I should say, the town we were in. As we're out there, we see these red lights in the distance, and we're thinking, oh, it's taillights from a car, except for the fact that it's all marshland and a lot of trees, and there's no road
Hmm.
that far back. So then we're confused. So we thought, okay, well, let's just flash at this thing and see what happens. And I don't know whose bright idea this was, but after researching UFO experiencer stories, later on in life, I realized that this was a terrible idea. So the armchair quarterback should have come out and said, "Don't do this." But unfortunately, hindsight's 2020, not when you're in the moment. So Sean takes the flashlight and he flashes it, and of course we get flashes back, bright white light, right where those red lights were. Immediately, my thought is, I am freaked the heck out. And he's like, "Hey, no, 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 don't go inside yet. Don't go inside yet. Let's see what happens." So he flashes again, and it flashes back again. And at this point, my fear is through the roof. So then this thing appears just above the tree line, and then another one behind it, and it's a circle of red lights. And you could see the
Wow.
outline of what looked like a craft. And this was at this point, it's at the end of the driveway. The driveway is probably give or take about 60 yards, 50 yards long. And this would
Hmm.
have been just above, like just past the road and the trees. So, I mean, less than 100 yards away where this first object was. The second object, when we saw it in the back, there was a light coming out of it, almost looked like a spotlight, like it was looking for something. Well, as soon
Hmm.
as those appeared, I got that was it for me. I went inside and I locked the door and freaked out. And my friend was trying to calm me down. My parents are like, "What's wrong with you?" Which apparently there was a lot wrong with me. So the next morning, we did go over to where we could get into the woods where this thing was, right on the other side of the road. And you could see that there was a whole circle of trees, like the trees that were growing up there, all their branches had been broken and burned off in a circle. So in that circle, it's funny enough, like going back to my parents' house before they both passed away, that area never grew back tree branches. So that circle existed right up until the day that my parents passed away.
Wow, that's interesting.
That's my story.
Oh, some sort of radiation or something get shot down and just burned the circle of tree. That's crazy.
Or it was coming off the craft, and the craft was that close to the treetops because it did look like it was low. So,
Yeah.
maybe that's what happened. But anyway, these things happen. I don't think it's as scary as yours, but as a kid, 13 years old, and you're flashing something, it's flashing back, and then it appears like that. I certainly was not okay.
No, I wouldn't be okay either. My next two stories are not going to be of aliens or UFOs, are both going to be paranormal, which I'm sure you have some paranormal stories that are pretty scary.
Hope they're good, Wizard, because if we're trying to one up each other, you got to bring it.
I'm bringing it. So the second one I have, I was at my grandmother's house spending the night. I think I was probably 12, 13 years old, something like that. And that night I had a dream, a vivid, crazy dream. In my dream, I was still in the room that I was sleeping in currently, but now it's in dream state. And the mirror that's beside the bed is kind of like rippling water. And I could see beings and things kind of passing in front of the mirror. It's very dark. I can barely see them. It's like shadows. Some of them would have glowing red eyes. This went on for a little while. In my dream, I'm freaking out. I'm kind of like, what? Where am I? What the hell? Am I looking into the hell, possibly? And a hand came through the mirror and it looked like it was coming for me. And then I woke up and I looked over at the mirror in real time now, and I realized I could see my breath.
Mm,
And I looked at the mirror, and it wasn't shiny silver, it was just black.
whoa.
So I put my blankets over my head and I started praying. Even at that age, I was a good Christian boy, and I was praying like, I don't know what that is. I didn't ask for it. I didn't sign up for it. Please, God, make that go away. I just prayed for a while and I laid there listening under the blankets, and I realized it started finally getting warm in the room again. So I pulled the blankets off, and the mirror is now shiny like a normal mirror. But The real fearful thing for me was this hand was reaching out at me. I woke up thinking I'm about to go into that mirror and never come back. Wherever that leads, or something's trying to pull me into it. And that's scary enough. But I learned later in life, I had an uncle growing up living in that room when he was a kid, was into the occult. He was into demonology. He was into, and not just the study of it, but the practice of it. He admitted that he did some things. He experienced creatures trying to choke him, trying to throw him. And also, he had opened a portal in that house and he never closed it.
First rule, always finish whatever ritual you start.
So, what do you got, Tommy?
Oh man. Well, first off, let me just backtrack on that story. That is a great story. A great, not a great experience for you, but it is an experience.
No, it was terrible.
I mean, I'll say there's a lot there because many people who get into the occult, a lot of the occultism practices various traditions. There's a lot of different traditions, but a lot of them want you to do conjuring so that you can learn how to banish properly.
Yeah.
The problem is not everybody is so studious about what they're bringing in, when they're bringing it in, what they're opening, how to close it. So there just leaves a lot of room for error, which is why I don't tend to do those kind of rituals. Like that is not anything I touch. I purely work on the banishing side of things because
Right.
it doesn't make sense to call anything forward because we don't know 100% what we're dealing with. We don't know how powerful they are. We don't know what they can use to get into our heads, into our minds, into our even our bodies because possession
Hmm.
happens, right? So if you're into the occult, it's one thing to read the books, it's another thing to do the practice. And in the practice, I just really can't caution people enough. Like doing any sort of conjuration, it just never ends well. I've never seen it work well and not come back and haunt somebody or eventually cause a problem. It's just safer to not do it. So there's my little PSA for people out there.
Don't call things up or open things when you don't know what you're opening. You don't know who you're conjuring up, and especially if you don't know how to banish it or close it,
Yeah.
it could really open a can of worms that you wish you never opened. So as scary as that whole mirror situation was, Tommy, I need to know that you can top that.
Well, speaking of conjurations gone wrong, we did talk about this in a previous episode, but I'll go into more detail. So, I had a case in Kingston, Rhode Island, and
Mm-hmm.
that was very early on in my paranormal endeavors. A buddy of mine who is an occultist brought me in and said, "Hey, I think I could use your help on this thing." Little did I know what the heck I was getting into. These people were Luciferians. They were doing conjuring and banishing rituals regularly. They, again, did a conjuring, but something happened to where they never completed the ritual. And I think it had a lot to do with the fact that they just didn't think it worked. So they were like, oh, nothing's happening. Turns out something did come through, something really nasty, very powerful. So we get brought in after weeks of this thing tormenting these people. And so it's a man, a woman, which were a couple, and then another friend who is their friend who is a practitioner of Wicca who, had been trying to help them, I guess, and may have been part of the ritual, very unclear. We didn't do as much preliminary casework as I normally do nowadays,
Mm-hmm.
which again, you learn as you go. So we didn't do it here, and that's why I do it now. But the first thing we walked in, like there's lights flickering. I think I told the story about how the wall bulged out in the shape of a face, which my friend briefly said, "Oh, just don't pay attention to that." And it's like, well, how do you not pay attention to that?
Yeah.
We get into the kitchen, we talk a little bit about what's going on, and then we create a safe room to perform ritual in. And for us, a lot of the safe room stuff is using black lights to disrupt the ability for these things to manifest, doing some
Mm-hmm.
incense and some energy work and rituals to kind of try to close off this entity in the room with us, which at the time sounded like a good idea until we finished the ritual to close it in the room. And at that point, you could see this shadow like a mass of like black smoke, like someone's rolling coal out of their dually.
Yeah.
It looked physical, which for me, that was one of the first times I'd had that experience. So
Wow.
this thing's spinning around the ceiling, and I'm watching it, and I'm getting close to freak out mode, and it goes into a light, and that light pop, light goes out, Goes into another light, pop, that one goes out. Still seeing this thing going around, and the Wiccan lady decided that she was going to start saying stuff that probably was not the right thing to say to an entity like this. And you could see the shadow go into her. There was a second, and then it came out of her. And as soon as it
Oh
left,
man.
she dropped like a sack of potatoes, or as our New England friends say, a sack of lobsters. So she dropped
Lobsters.
down and she was just on the ground, unconscious, completely unconscious. Stayed that way until the ritual was completely finished, by the way. So this thing's swirling around. We're all kind of freaking out, except for my buddy Anthony, he was a cage fighter and like the most brilliant occultist I ever knew. So we start doing our main ritual to try to contain this thing. Now, the binding ritual requires it to be bound to an object, and we had that, and then we had that in another thing and in another thing. And Anthony, my buddy, decided he was going to put it into his car. So it's in the back of his car, which was this old like Lincoln Town Car type thing, massive boat. A couple days later, he's like, "Oh man, I got to take that thing out of my car. I haven't yet." And I'm like, "Yeah, dude, you got to go throw that in the ocean because we do not need that thing biting us in the back end." And he's, "Oh, it'll be fine. It'll be fine." So later that day, he's driving down, and if you've ever been to Providence, Rhode Island, there's a lot of hills. He was going down one of the hills, and his brake lines went out, and he careened through traffic and ended up basically totaling the car. Luckily, no one was killed, but it was incredibly terrifying. And what they told him is it looked like his brake lines had been chewed out by animals, which again
Oh
could be a
wow.
real thing that happened. This could all be happenstance. But he definitely got the thought that, oh, this might have to do with our little incident. So he goes to the
Hmm.
back of the car to get the encasing stuff out where we had bound this thing, and it had completely disappeared. So
Wow.
that was my first like truly demonic case that I'd ever done. And it should have said somewhere in my brain, I probably should have said, don't do this anymore. But when you like do these things and you see the relief that the family gets, and you find ways to do it safer and more effectively, and you help empower the people you're with, not by telling them how to do magic, but like finding what works for them, what their religion is, what spirituality they're drawn to, and you help empower them and you help them get over their trauma. It it just was sort of like this, I think I'm doing a good thing here, and I just felt called to do it. So
Yeah.
I kept going back and doing it, and that's where we are today. But that case was the starting point, and I think it was a good testing ground to see like what kind of weird stuff can I encounter and still continue to do the work. And it may not have been the scariest case I was ever on, but it's definitely in my top five.
That definitely tops the one that I had because that if almost could have gotten someone killed. That's
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
That's
Anthony's car was
crazy.
totaled, and that thing was a boat. That was a land yacht, and the fact that it just crumpled and the brakes went out, it was, the timing was just too. Synchronicities, man, synchronicities.
Yeah, it all lines up in a time frame that's too perfect. Well, that definitely something we've always talked about with entities is that they don't experience time like we do. So he could have forgotten about that thing and a year went by and the thing finally attacks a year later.
Yeah,
I mean, they don't, time is nothing to them.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's very scary. Wow.
Yeah, but what's your next story, Wizard? I want to know how you're going to top that one.
I don't know if it'll top it, but it's definitely strange. It's my third and final one I have, and then I was interested in hearing a couple of yours.
Okay.
This is at my grandma's house again. And again, I think that it ties into the second story I just gave. This time we were watching TV, and from my viewpoint, there's the TV, and down this way is the hallway into three or four, like three bedrooms and a bathroom. And there's a couple like hallway light, little tiny lights you plug in, outlet lights,
Yeah, like
a
the
night light,
nightlights.
night
Yeah.
lights. It has two night lights in the hallway at the end, and they go dark, and they come back on again
Hmm.
like something ran in front of them. And I look down there and I don't see anything. I'm like, huh, that was weird. Anyway, so I keep watching TV and I see like a black mass kind of move from not from the furthest bedroom, but now one that's a little closer. It kind of peeks out around the doorway. There's no colors or eyes or face or anything. It's just black.
Wow.
And it goes back in and I sit there for a minute. I'm like, I didn't just see that. I don't know what that was. I'll just pretend that I didn't see it. I'm going to continue watching TV. And about 5 minutes later, the two night lights that are at the end of the hallway, they go black again. I'm like, oh God, there's that thing again. And I look down the hallway and the night lights are still black. It's standing there, the entire figure looking at me. And I slowly turned to my grandma and I said, There's something there's something in the hallway. What is going on, Granny? And she kind of peeked down there and she said, Honey, that thing's been here for years. And I was like, Years? She's like, Yeah, way back when your uncle was a young one and messing around with stuff. And she said it never hurts anything, never causes any trouble. She says, I see that thing frequently in the corner of my eye or dashing across the hallway or going this way or that way. And then I looked again and it was gone. And I said, But I have to go in there and sleep tonight. And I've already had this dream of about the mirror. I didn't share the mirror dream with her, but I was like, whatever that is probably still in there, and I have to go sleep in that room. Luckily, I slept that night. I never saw anything. But it was creepy enough that I saw that. But then my grandma validated that it had been there for years, and she
Right.
just lived with it. Like, oh yeah, I see that thing several times a week. I'm like, Grandma, you got to tell people. What is that? She goes, I don't know. And then the final thing she said, it comes out of the attic and materializes.
Hmm.
Like there's a doorway to the attic at the very end of the hallway, and it comes down out of that. She's seen it materialize right there and then dash into another room.
What was your uncle doing in the attic?
I don't know. Maybe he went up there. I don't know. I don't know the story of that, but
Yeah.
so that scared me that I saw it. Then I had to sleep in the room at night with this thing possibly walking around. But I've heard, Tommy, that when you see an entity, a paranormal entity, when it's black like that it could be evil. A ghost typically isn't just a void of energy or cold or something like that.
It just depends. Like, there's places like Waverly Hills Sanitarium in Louisville, Kentucky, that you see a lot of these shadowy figures, and some people will call them all shadow people. I have a whole we can do a whole episode on shadow people because I used to do extensive
Hmm.
research on the topic. But in my mind, like stuff like that, it may be human spirit because they're just trying
Okay.
to manifest in any way they can. The things you have to do
Hmm.
is you're like it's all about correlating data, right? So is there a weird smell with that thing showing up? Is there red eyes with that thing showing up? I mean, you did have the incident with the mirror, which
Yeah.
sounds much more like a demonic situation. So, yeah, it could very well be tied to that. Or it could just be another spirit that's kind of just doing its thing, getting noticed, maybe trying to get a little bit of num food off of you because you see it and you're a little freaked out and you got to sleep in that room. But I don't always jump the gun and say everything's demonic, but I think, yeah,
Right.
given the other story, it's possible.
The fact that it came out of the attic, maybe it was something else, like you meant, maybe a human spirit. But they had built that house new, so nobody died up there, I don't think. So
Well,
I don't
unless
know.
there was like an old barn there or a different house, or,
It could have
you
been.
know, could have been somebody who died in a tree out there, or it could even be just a human spirit that came in because of what your uncle was doing, because it's not
Right.
just demonic stuff. But at the same time, again, given the other circumstances, it could very well be something that's working with something more demonic through the portal that was
Hmm.
obviously conjured up in that mirror. So yeah, it's that's interesting, man. That's a really interesting story. That's cool. I kind of want to go investigate your grandmother's house now.
Yeah. She doesn't live, I mean, she's gone and somebody else lives there now. They've sold the house. But, well, those are some of the three stories I've had. That's really the only three really scary things. I have a few others, but that's the real ones that really shook me. Can you top that one?
Oh, I can. I don't know if you want me to.
Or
I
if our viewers want you to.
Well, I there's a lot of stories. I mean, again, I've been doing these investigations for a long time, and so there's actually so many cases I forget a lot of them. And I actually was talking to one of my investigator friends, Dave Harvey, the other day, and he brought up, "Oh, remember this case where this thing scratched me and this happened and that happened?" I'm like, "No, no, I don't remember any of that because,
Wow.
again, we were just doing so many cases." And you juggle a lot of personalities, a lot of people, and so the families will blend together sometimes. But one case that stands out for sure, it's one that it's probably the most physically real I'd ever seen something in terms of this phenomenon. There was a case that was referred to me by a team in California in an area of sort of just outside of like Yosemite. And the family had been having issues. They'd been getting scratched. They had been smelling sulfurous odors and other bad odors,
Hmm.
and just a lot of what we would consider demonic activity. Several of the investigators that had been there had been having demonic nightmares at home, miles and miles and miles away from this house. And they persisted, and then family members would have similar dreams and nightmares, and they weren't even involved in the case. So I knew something bad was happening. I just didn't know how bad.
Yeah.
So I went in myself, one of the local investigators, and at the time it was my girlfriend who wanted to be part of this stuff. And in hindsight, I realized that was a poor decision. So that's why my wife doesn't do cases with me. Anyway, so we go in, and there's just this very like oppressive feeling, and your stomach's in knots, and you kind of get a little bit of nausea, and you're kind of feeling like you're being watched, and there's just your hair is raising up. Like it's all a confluence of these things. And even with
Hmm.
all the protection rituals I do and prayers I do, I was still feeling it. So I knew the other investigators were really feeling it. So to protect the family, we kind of safeguarded as best we could where they were at using sacred salts and other things, and went outside. The reason I try to separate the family is so, like, if we're doing something to try to get evidence so we can determine what it is, I don't want the family affected by it.
Right.
We're outside, we're trying to keep the family safe. And I get to the point where I start saying, okay, I'm going to try some Abrahamic faith stuff. So I started reciting the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic. And
Hmm.
everything just changed. It got super, super cold. It got real dark outside. Like it was dark outside, but it got real dark. Like something was eating up the light. And then the investigator, the male investigator who was with us, said, "Oh my God, did you see that?" And we turn and we all see this shadow that looks like almost like a giant cat or a wolf. And I'm thinking it's a real mountain lion because we're in that kind of country.
Hmm.
But then we saw it go in front of the light and it just disappeared.
Oh, wow.
And at that point, I'm like, now I know what we're dealing with. So I started doing prayers and invoking the name of Jesus. And when I did that, the first time I invoked Jesus' name, we heard a loud screech, and it was, you couldn't tell where it was coming from. It sounded like it was coming from all around. And so I'm like, okay, if that's maybe it's an owl, let me try it again. So I did it again, and the same noise, way louder. So I turn and I see something against the trees, and it's a giant black mass. I mean, the top of it had to have been somewhere just under the power line, so it was massive.
Wow.
And two glowing red eyes. Now I'm thinking, oh, I'm just seeing this, so don't worry about it. But then my girlfriend at the time immediately grabs onto me and hides behind me. And she's like, holy, like, oh my God, what is that? And the other gentleman starts losing his mind. And I'm like, you got to stay, dude, stay here. Don't go
Yeah.
anywhere. We got to stay together. So I kept doing invocations and prayers. Over time, it finally dissipated. Everything kind of petered out. So it had manifested as much as it could. And I think then it ran out of energy. And I was like, okay,
Hmm.
this is obviously much more aggressive than what I thought we were going to be dealing with. Let me get these people out of here because they're not prepared to do this case. So went back to the house. I calmly and very collectively told the family, like, look, I would like to come back. We would like to try to help you more. Here's some things you can do in the meantime. And, I'll be back with a different team and we'll try to help out. So that's where, like, I try to take people on cases that are people that I know are mentally solid, because it's as much about being mentally and spiritually solid as it is about physical solid, because yeah, there's physical things that can happen. Like I thought it was a mountain lion, but it clearly was not. But then there's the
Hmm.
other side of it where that spiritual fortitude and that mental fortitude is, there's no way around it. You need to have that. So that would be in the top five cases of scariest crap I've ever experienced. I'd say that's right up there in the one or two spot.
That is humongously scary. That is crazy. And that kind of lines up with, like you said, how they weren't mentally prepared, or you need to be mentally and spiritually prepared to go
Yeah.
after these things. And that's even in the Bible. There's instances where the disciples tried to go after or cast out demons and it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
And they went back to Jesus and they're like, we cast him out in your name. How did that not work? And he said, it wasn't me that was faltering. You were not ready. It takes fasting, it takes this, and they
Yes.
list a few things there. He's like, you didn't fulfill the entire package. Certain demons maybe are pretty small or weak or not as powerful, but if you go up against some of the bigger ones, it takes a lot more than just a few words.
Yeah, and that's why Catholic priests will do all that preparation, right? Like they
Yeah.
fast, they do their prayers, they, several confessions, and then in terms of like the spirituality beliefs that I follow, it's the same thing. Like you eat only very specific things, you have to ensure that your immune system's not compromised, you have to meditate and be steadfast in your prayers every single day because you just never know what you're going to run into out there.
Demons can sense sin.
Hmm.
They can smell, they can know what's going on in your life and use it against you.
Oh yeah, and they do.
And if you haven't made things right between you and the maker or whoever you believe in, those things are now, they're still in the open. They're still fresh. They're still there. They're still with you. And now you go to try to take down this larger demon or whatever. And it says, I know that you cheated on your wife, or I know that you cheated your boss out of $4 million, or, and they completely just turn the tables on you.
Yeah.
I knew a friend who was in a church that kind of got into exorcism, did things like not on a large level, but he had a friend that tried to get into it who wasn't prepared, who wasn't trained, and really it claimed to be a Christian, but really didn't walk the walk. He was kind of one of the casual quasi Christians. Anyways, this friend and his friend went to an exorcism, and the friend who was not strong in his faith challenged a demon and said
Oh,
something about the name of Jesus, and then the demon turned right. This person, which was at the time possessed, it looked right at him and said, "We know who Jesus is, but who are you?" He doesn't know who you
wow.
are.
Wow.
I was like, "Whoa." There you go. He wasn't prepared, just like you said.
The biggest thing I can say is it's better to not mess with things that are of this nature. And
Right,
I tell, because there's a lot of people that'll come up and be like, oh, teach me what you do. And it's like, I can't because at the end of the day, I know that I'm not the one actually doing anything. It's
right.
it's God, it's creator, it's the great mystery above that works through all of us, not just me,
Mm-hmm.
but all of us to do the things that we need to do. And the fact that I was guided to do these things and the fact that I always am trying to be in a place of humility while I do it because I don't know everything and I don't claim to know everything and I don't know if I'm going to be able to help people, but I just follow what feels like good divine guidance to help people out, and it keeps pushing me to do these cases here and there. And I think like that's the difference is it a calling or is it ego? And
Right.
most of the time, unfortunately, it is ego. And most of the time, when it's ego, that's how people get hurt. And
Backfires.
if you want a really good book on this, Hostage to the Devil is one of the best books. It was by Father Malachi Martin. That gentleman was involved in a lot of exorcisms and a lot of really crazy cases, but Hostage to the Devil speaks to how bad it can really get. Now that's from a Catholic perspective, but it just gives you an idea of like what people are up against. Anyone who asks me like, "Oh, I want to know how to do what you do," it's like, no, you don't, because it's not worth the amount of effort you need to put in. It requires so much to be in a position where you can be okay because you have to remember these cases don't just end when you go home. These cases
Right.
sometimes start before you even get called to go in. They sometimes happen well after you've done a case. If you haven't
Mm-hmm.
done it properly, then you're a target until that is dealt with. So, my thing is just don't get involved if it's not something that you feel divinely guided to do or that you feel God is telling you to do. And if God tells you to do it, just ask yourself, why me? And then do what you can to be the best vessel for that love and for that compassion that you can be.
Yeah. Definitely, if you get into those situations, you have to understand that if anything's going to happen for the positive, it's not going to be anything that you can do. You are
No.
not physically capable of doing anything. It's being something done through you.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. That's the big difference, and I think that's what separates the God's gunslingers from the people who are actually doing the work. Is we realize we're not the ones doing the work. We're just like a tool that's being used. And I hate to call myself a tool,
Yeah.
but it's pretty accurate.
I have lots of tools in my toolbox at the shop.
Yeah, but you don't have a Tommy there. That's the problem.
No, no,
But you don't need one.
I have no paranormal equipment. I need to maybe look into some of that at some point. I don't know if I want to get into it though, because like you said, if you're not experienced, you probably shouldn't be messing with those things.
Yeah, I mean, with your faith, you're strong enough in your faith where I think you might be able to handle some just human haunt fun stuff. And there's places that it's not bad hauntings, it's just
Yeah,
haunting. And
just haunting. Yeah.
yeah, but if you honestly, again, Wizard, if you just don't, if you're like unsure, then don't do it. It's like always better err on the side of caution because it's not really worth it. Like, why are you doing it is always the
Yeah.
question.
Well, that's three of my scary stories, and that's definitely some of Tommy's scary stories. I think you win, Tommy. I think you win
I
this.
don't want to win. I don't want to win this.
No, no, but you do. And I'm sure you could go even further and even scarier. And I think that's enough for this episode. That's definitely enough.
Got
So,
to save something for everybody to come back for later.
yeah, that's definitely why you guys have to hit the subscribe button because there's more stories to come, more things to be discussed. And like we always say in all of our videos, we can all come together from all different faiths, all different beliefs, all different walks of life. We can talk about these things, such as Bigfoot. If it exists, it's not going to change the fact whether it exists based on which religion mentioned it, or
Yeah.
it's there. No matter what each person thinks about it, it's still there. So we don't need to fight about it.
Not worth fighting over anything, Wizard. I mean, we're all in this
No.
together. We're all on this planet together. So why not just try to get along?
Yep. And if we can share the knowledge or share our experiences, we can all use that knowledge and experience in our own lives. Is kind of how I see it.
Yeah. So you guys should share this video if you like it and if you think somebody will benefit from hearing it.
Definitely share, like, subscribe for sure.
But before we go, we've got some viewer questions. Would you like to hear those?
Yay.
We got to give a shout out to our beautiful fans and friends out there that watch us.
Definitely.
So, any chance we can, we want to get you guys involved. So, here we go. First question is from Kevin Walls 6497. Oh,
Mm.
numbers, love it. All right, ready? Does the paranormal always have to be human? Ever get cat or dog hauntings? So I can answer this, Wizard, and then we'll hear your 2 cents on it if you don't mind.
Sure.
Awesome. So, yes, in fact, we do get hauntings of cats and dogs and other things. So, when we were talking about my house earlier, where I grew up, there was neighbors that had this beautiful horse named Arab. It was a white Arabian horse, so that's why they named it that. And
Mm-hmm.
Glenn and Star, they watch our show. So, hello, Glenn and Star. I love you guys. Anyway, they became family to us because they moved in next door and they just really were family and they took care of my folks off and on throughout the years while I was away. So, they had that horse and the horse passed away. So, they were like, hey, do you want to come by and check out our area and see if there's any activity? Because they had some other stuff going on. So I went there with two other investigators, and we did a recording session, EVP recording section, electronic voice phenomenon. And what we captured was it sounded like a horse.
Wow.
So for me, it was like, oh, if it's not Arab, it's another horse, but it's likely Arab because I don't know if there were too many horses in that area at the time. But it was cool to be able to capture that. So yeah, there's definitely cases like that. And in some of these old abandoned hospitals, we've seen phantom cats. And unfortunately, with that demonic case I talked about earlier, there was the phantom, what looked like a mountain lion and what was not a mountain lion. But there are cases where that happens. And there's a lot of pet owners that after their pets will die, they feel that their pet is jumping up on the bed next to them, or they'll feel like the cat's rubbing up against their leg. So there's my 2 cents on that. And Wizard, what do you think about that?
Well, the question asks, do entities have to be human? And even if it's not animals, there can be demonic entities. There can be
True.
they don't a lot of I would say most of them in the grand scheme of the entire universe are not human. Any ones that we see on Earth probably could be human entities, but cats, dogs, horses, or whatever. I would think anything that had an animal that had kind of a sentient existence about them. Obviously, a centipede probably, I don't know if it would have a spirit or not.
Oh, I hope not. Centipede ghost sounds gross.
Yeah, but like a cat or a dog or something that could show compassion, that had a little bit of connection with humanity. I definitely think there could be a ghost there. It was tied to a human spirit while they were alive, because we are a spirit inside of a body.
Yep. Just living in
So
this meat suit.
it is a meat suit. It totally is. It's like an astronaut uses a suit to navigate their environment. That's what a spirit is doing here.
Wish I would have picked a thinner meat suit.
Yeah, I could use a thinner one. It'd be a lot easier on my knees.
Oh yeah, for sure. The older we get, the more it creaks.
Yeah.
So there you go, Kevin Wall. I mean, sounds like we both are in agreement that there's definitely other stuff out there. What do you think? Tell us in the comments. We want to hear back from you. And speaking of hearing back, we got another question from Gemalot, which I didn't get
Camelot.
corrected on the name. So good. That's good. Thank you, Gemalot. If I'm saying your name
Mhm.
wrong, please let me know. So Gemalot asks us, Tommy, what are your thoughts on YouTubers who share their daily haunting experience with their viewers? Oh, this is a loaded question for me. Well, Gemalot, here's my thought on it. If people are investigating their own homes, which I've already discussed in previous episodes, I think that's a very bad idea. And if you're exploiting a haunting in your own home for YouTube, personally, I feel that's a bad idea. If it's demonic, you're just feeding demonic stuff. If it's demonic and you're giving it a platform, you're then sharing that with other people, which to me feels like a really bad Johnny Appleseed moment, personally, because I don't believe in
Mhm.
sharing demonic forces with other folks. It's just not my thing. So, ultimately, I think that's not great. If a channel of investigators is saying, hey, here are our protocols, here's how we do it, and they're mostly dealing with like human spirit hauntings, I have less of an issue with that. And I know, I have friends that do shows like Haunted Discoveries. They're doing it because they're trying to educate people on proper protocols, on how to take care of yourself, how to spot these things. But for me, I'm really cautious about how we interweave these worlds of media and hauntings. And I just think, you know, if you're just trying to feed something and get recognition, that just never seems to be a good reason to do a thing. So there's my response. Wizard, what do you think about this?
I think from my point of view, it would be if, like, kind of like you said, if they're doing this to educate or to help other people, say, here's a situation that happened, here's what was done to solve it. You shouldn't probably get into this or whatever. It helps people understand. It also maybe helps to show what's out there. But if you're just doing it for numbers or just doing it for views or even taunting things further than they should be taunted or going a lot further than you should just to get a reaction so you can get more views or something, I think that's very dangerous to do that because when you turn off your camera, whatever you just taunted doesn't turn off.
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
yeah,
Doesn't stop because the camera's not rolling. That's for sure.
no.
And in fact, it's more likely to do more stuff when the camera's not rolling. So
Hmm.
yeah, I just think Gemma, it's not worth it. But I'd also caution people that if you're watching YouTube videos where people are exploiting a demonic entity for views and recognition, then you may not want to watch that channel personally.
No.
We talk about the cases, but I don't play evidence from those particular cases because that's more of an entry point than us just discussing the case at afar. But if someone's like, hey, here's the camera in my house where the demon comes up and does its thing, you probably don't want to be watching that because then you're connected to it. And it's almost like a form of invitation in a way to that entity.
Right. Hmm.
And as we know, invitation is the first step towards possession.
It's just like we talked about in the past. In our reality, in our world, there's rules and laws that we have to abide by. The same applies in the spirit world, I believe.
Yeah.
And the first rule that allows them to make a step towards you as far as demonic entities is the, like you said, the invitation. They can't cross that line at will just because they feel like it.
Nope.
That needs to be that doorway opened. And they're like, okay, you just opened the doorway, which means in my handbook of the dead, means I can walk in now and severely screw you up.
Yeah. And don't really need that in my life. I can tell you that.
No, no, I don't either.
Yeah, so if you got stories, share them with us, and please like, subscribe, and share this channel with people because we want to put out the good stories and not be the people showing you demonic hauntings just to get a scare out of you or to make you food for our otherworldly nemesis. Feel free in the comments if you've got questions, whatever they are, we will ask them on future episodes, and we are very active in the comments. We both join in, but please, friendly, fun, family-friendly discussions only. No yelling, no swearing, and no cursing each other because we don't want to have to do dehexing spells here. We just want everybody
No.
to be able to get along like Wizard and I do. Two people, different belief structures, but we respect and like each other as friends. And I think we can all do that. And we hope that that's what you take home with you from watching us too.
Hit the like and subscribe, guys. There's many more cool episodes to come. You don't want to miss out. And if you haven't already, watch all the previous videos. If you're new to the channel, there's all kinds of really good material, and there's yet more to come. So make sure to hit the subscribe button. And thanks for watching. Can you believe that?